Water, we take it for granted until it runs out. In 2026, an alarming number of U.S. cities are facing severe water stress, and the implications go far beyond faucets and lawns. Housing markets, local economies, and property values are now directly tied to a resource most Americans assume will always flow. This isn't a distant climate warning or a news soundbite. Data from 2026 shows some of the fastest-growing urban areas are consuming water faster than reservoirs and aquifers can replenish. Demand is rising with population growth, heat waves are intensifying, and infrastructure is aging. When water availability drops, utilities raise costs, developers hesitate, and homeowners start to rethink investments. That ripple quickly spreads. Property prices stagnate or drop, new construction stalls, and markets once thought safe suddenly wobble. In this countdown, we're breaking down the 12 cities most exposed to this water-to-housing risk. You'll see which cities are already rationing, which suburbs are draining aquifers, and which markets could collapse if drought patterns continue. Some are desert-adjacent hotspots, others are unexpectedly water-stressed urban centers. The 2026 data isn't just theoretical, it's a snapshot of real economic vulnerability, where water scarcity can act as the trigger for a housing crash. Stick around, because understanding this now could save you thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, if you own, rent, or plan to buy in these areas. Water isn't just essential for life, it's becoming the foundation of the housing market itself. Before we dive in, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You'll want to know which cities are at risk before national headlines catch up. Let's get into the countdown. City number 1, Phoenix, Arizona. Drought and unsustainable growth. Phoenix, Arizona has long been celebrated for its booming economy, affordable housing compared to other Sunbelt cities, and seemingly limitless growth opportunities. But in 2026, the city faces a precarious reality. Water scarcity has emerged as a significant threat to the housing market. The rapid population expansion of recent decades has outpaced the natural replenishment of local water sources, creating an imbalance that experts warn is unsustainable. Phoenix relies heavily on the Colorado River and underground aquifers, both of which are under increasing stress due to prolonged droughts, rising temperatures, and climate-driven reductions in precipitation. Reservoir levels are hovering near historic lows, and municipal water agencies are implementing stricter conservation measures to prevent a crisis. While residents have been warned about potential shortages, growth continues unabated, fueled by job opportunities, lifestyle appeal, and housing affordability relative to coastal cities. This disconnect between perceived abundance and actual resource limits is creating a volatile environment for the housing market. Developers are beginning to reassess the long-term viability of new projects, especially in suburban neighborhoods that require extensive water infrastructure to support residential expansion. Many homes in rapidly growing areas now face higher utility costs and potential future rationing, which could reduce demand and slow property appreciation. Investors who previously saw Phoenix as a sure bet are reevaluating portfolios, factoring in the risk of rising operational costs and water restrictions. The city's long-term sustainability plans have struggled to keep pace with explosive population growth, leaving a gap between development ambitions and environmental realities. Water scarcity is no longer a theoretical concern. It is impacting homebuyers' calculations, influencing affordability, and altering market dynamics. Phoenix serves as a cautionary example of how environmental constraints, if ignored, can destabilize even the most active real estate markets. In 2026, the city's combination of rapid expansion, resource limits, and climate pressures demonstrates that a housing boom fueled by perception can quickly turn into a market under stress when essential resources are scarce. City number 2, Las Vegas, Nevada, casino capital, faces water crisis. Las Vegas, Nevada has earned global recognition as a hub for entertainment, tourism, and desert living. Yet behind the glittering skyline lies an increasingly serious water crisis that threatens the housing market in 2026. The city depends largely on Lake Mead and surrounding aquifers, both of which are under severe stress due to ongoing drought conditions and decades of overuse. Water levels in Lake Mead have dropped to levels not seen in modern history, triggering cutbacks, restrictions, and higher water costs for residents and businesses. Rapid population growth in the Las Vegas metropolitan area has exacerbated these issues, as expanding suburbs and new housing developments place additional pressure on limited municipal water resources. While the city remains economically attractive, with tourism, entertainment, and service industries providing steady employment, the environmental strain has introduced a hidden risk for homeowners and investors alike. Developers face increasing hurdles, as new construction projects must now navigate stricter water permitting regulations, costly infrastructure requirements, and heightened scrutiny from municipal authorities. Many planned subdivisions on the outskirts of the city have been delayed or downsized due to these constraints. Potential buyers are factoring in higher utility costs, limited water availability, and the uncertainty of long-term supply, which influences purchasing decisions and slows demand in some neighborhoods. Rising water costs can also directly affect affordability, impacting household budgets and mortgage calculations, and forcing residents to reprioritize spending. The combination of ongoing drought, regulatory tightening, and increasing competition for scarce water resources has created a market environment in which property values could stagnate or decline if supply conditions worsen. Las Vegas illustrates a critical lesson for 2026. Even cities that appear economically resilient can face hidden vulnerabilities when essential resources like water are constrained. Housing markets are no longer insulated from environmental realities, and in desert regions, the availability and cost of water are becoming central determinants of property stability, buyer confidence, and long-term investment security. City number 3, Los Angeles, California. Drought, infrastructure, and housing risk. Los Angeles, California has long been a symbol of opportunity, glamour, and economic dynamism. But in 2026, the city faces one of the most significant long-term threats to its housing market: chronic water scarcity. Decades of rapid population growth, combined with aging infrastructure and increasingly frequent droughts, have created a scenario where water availability is no longer guaranteed. LA depends heavily on imported water from distant sources like the Colorado River and the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, yet climate change has reduced snowpack levels and river flows, straining this complex distribution system. For homeowners, this translates to rising water costs, rationing measures, and uncertainty about future supply, factors that directly influence housing demand and affordability. The real estate market is particularly vulnerable because Los Angeles neighborhoods vary widely in water infrastructure reliability. Newer suburbs rely on extensions of municipal pipelines and aquifers that are increasingly stressed, while older neighborhoods face outdated systems that require costly maintenance and retrofits. Property values in areas dependent on limited or uncertain water access are starting to flatten as potential buyers weigh long-term sustainability against lifestyle appeal. Developers, meanwhile, are cautious. Large-scale residential projects are facing regulatory scrutiny, environmental impact assessments, and restrictions designed to preserve water supplies, slowing construction timelines and increasing development costs. In addition to supply constraints, the human factor intensifies risk. Residents are now more aware of California's water vulnerability than ever before, influencing both short-term purchasing decisions and long-term investment strategies. High water bills, mandatory conservation, and even the possibility of rationing have become considerations that can make or break a sale. Mortgage lenders are beginning to assess water-related risks as part of property evaluations, particularly for homes in water-stressed districts. In this context, Los Angeles exemplifies the direct connection between essential resources and housing stability. The 2026 data shows that even in economically prosperous regions, environmental limits can trigger subtle but widespread market shifts, creating volatility for both current homeowners and potential buyers. As the city grows, water scarcity isn't just an inconvenience. It is a market force shaping who can afford to live in Los Angeles, where, and at what price. City number 4, Phoenix's neighbor, Tucson, Arizona. Suburban water pressure. Tucson, Arizona, often overshadowed by its larger neighbor Phoenix, is facing an equally critical water challenge in 2026 that could directly impact its housing market. The city lies in the Sonoran Desert, and groundwater supplies are being drawn faster than they can replenish, creating long-term sustainability issues. Tucson's growth over the past decade has been driven by affordability compared to Phoenix, combined with employment opportunities in tech, education, and healthcare. However, the very factors driving population growth are accelerating water stress. Wells and aquifers are dropping, municipal water allocations are being adjusted, and new regulations are requiring developers to ensure long-term water security before projects can proceed. The housing implications are significant. Neighborhoods that were once considered affordable are seeing slow depreciation as buyers hesitate to invest in areas dependent on limited or uncertain water access. New construction is increasingly scrutinized for water usage efficiency, increasing costs, and limiting the number of units that can be built. Existing homeowners face rising utility bills and mandatory conservation measures, which affect household budgets and purchasing decisions. Real estate investors are paying attention. Properties without guaranteed water access carry higher financial risk, reducing market liquidity and potentially slowing sales. The human element compounds the risk. Residents and prospective buyers are increasingly aware of Tucson's long-term water vulnerability, making water security a key factor in relocation decisions. Schools, hospitals, and community amenities also depend on reliable water supply, meaning scarcity can indirectly affect neighborhood desirability. Tucson in 2026 illustrates that even smaller, less high-profile cities are not immune to environmental stressors. Water shortages are no longer an abstract concern. They influence property demand, construction feasibility, and long-term investment stability. For Tucson, housing isn't just about affordability, it's about ensuring that the city's infrastructure and natural resources can support life for decades to come. City number 5, San Diego, California. Coastal appeal meets water limits. San Diego, California is renowned for its mild climate, coastal beaches, and thriving economy. But in 2026, this desirable lifestyle comes with an invisible risk: water scarcity that could destabilize its housing market. Despite being on the Pacific coast, San Diego relies heavily on imported water from Northern California and the Colorado River. Persistent droughts, lower snowpack levels, and extended heat waves have strained these sources, forcing municipalities to implement strict conservation measures and plan for future shortages. For homeowners and buyers, the consequences are clear: rising water costs, potential rationing, and increased expenses for both existing properties and new developments. The housing market is directly impacted by these factors. San Diego's neighborhoods vary widely in terms of water infrastructure. Older areas face aging pipelines and reservoirs requiring costly maintenance, while newly developed suburbs must navigate strict water permitting and sustainability regulations before construction can proceed. As a result, some neighborhoods are seeing slower appreciation and longer time on the market, as buyers factor in the risk of limited water availability. Developers are cautious, re-evaluating projects to ensure water sustainability, which adds construction costs and can delay completion timelines. Beyond infrastructure, public perception plays a major role. Residents increasingly consider water reliability when deciding where to buy or invest. High utility bills, drought-driven restrictions, and the potential for rationing influence affordability and the desirability of properties. Mortgage lenders are also taking note, as water-related risks can affect long-term property values and investment security. San Diego's experience in 2026 illustrates a critical point. Even coastal cities with strong economies and attractive lifestyles are not immune to environmental pressures. Water scarcity is no longer a theoretical concern. It is shaping market demand, investment strategy, and property values. Buyers, investors, and homeowners must consider long-term water availability alongside traditional factors like price, location, and school districts. In short, in San Diego, water is no longer just a utility. It has become a central factor in the stability and sustainability of the housing market. City number 6, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Desert expansion under pressure. Albuquerque, New Mexico is experiencing rapid growth in 2026, driven by affordable housing, a growing tech and service economy, and scenic desert surroundings. But the city's location in an arid region places it at high risk for water-related housing market stress. Albuquerque relies heavily on the Rio Grande and underground aquifers, both of which are under increasing strain due to decades of overuse, prolonged drought, and population expansion. Water scarcity in Albuquerque is no longer a hypothetical scenario. It is influencing residential planning, construction, and property demand. The housing market feels the effects. Suburban expansions and new residential developments are increasingly scrutinized for water sustainability. Developers must navigate regulatory hurdles that ensure long-term water access, often increasing project costs and slowing new construction. Neighborhoods farther from municipal water infrastructure face limitations on new builds, which can reduce overall housing availability and stall appreciation in previously high-demand areas. Existing homeowners are also affected. Rising utility costs, mandatory water conservation measures, and long-term supply uncertainty impact affordability and influence decisions about buying, selling, or investing in local properties. Public awareness is intensifying the market impact. Residents and potential buyers are more cautious, carefully evaluating neighborhoods based on water access, infrastructure reliability, and projected utility costs. This shift in perception can influence demand and property values over time, as areas with limited water security become less attractive. Albuquerque demonstrates that even cities with lower cost of living advantages can face hidden risks that threaten housing stability. Water scarcity affects not only daily life, but also investment security, long-term affordability, and overall market confidence. By 2026, Albuquerque highlights a growing reality across arid U.S. cities. Housing markets are increasingly dependent on essential resources. Water availability, infrastructure reliability, and environmental sustainability are no longer secondary considerations. They are central to whether neighborhoods thrive or stall. For residents and investors alike, understanding water risk is now a critical part of making informed decisions in Albuquerque's evolving housing market. City number 7, Denver, Colorado. Urban boom meets water limits. Denver, Colorado has experienced tremendous growth over the past decade, transforming into one of the most attractive cities in the Mountain West. High-paying jobs in tech, finance, and energy, coupled with a vibrant cultural scene and outdoor lifestyle, have drawn residents from across the country. However, in 2026, the city faces a serious water challenge that could undermine its housing market. Denver relies on snowmelt from the Rocky Mountains, rivers, and reservoirs to meet residential and commercial demand, but rising temperatures, declining snowpack, and ongoing drought conditions have reduced water availability. Infrastructure struggles to keep pace with rapid population growth, forcing municipalities to implement stricter conservation measures and higher water fees. The housing market is directly impacted by these pressures. New developments must now meet stricter water usage standards, adding cost and complexity to construction. Some neighborhoods farther from major supply lines face restrictions on building approvals, limiting housing availability and slowing market growth. Rising water costs affect household budgets, reducing disposable income and potentially influencing buyer decisions. Homeowners considering renovations or expansions may also face limitations due to water usage restrictions, which could impact property values in affected areas. Investors are taking notice. Denver's previously fast-moving market is showing signs of sensitivity to resource availability. Homes in areas with stable water access continue to attract buyers, while properties in higher risk zones experience longer market time. Potential buyers are factoring in water reliability as a long-term investment consideration, reshaping traditional demand patterns. Additionally, public perception is shifting. Residents now rank water security as a key factor in choosing neighborhoods, schools, and even recreational planning. The 2026 data highlights that Denver's housing market is no longer insulated from environmental stressors. Water scarcity is shaping urban development, market stability, and the city's long-term livability. For those invested in Denver, understanding water infrastructure, regulatory changes, and conservation requirements is becoming as critical as location, price, and school quality. The city exemplifies how even economically robust, growing urban centers can face hidden vulnerabilities when essential resources are constrained, making water availability a central factor in housing market stability. City number 8, Fresno, California. Agriculture, drought, and housing vulnerability. Fresno, California sits at the heart of the Central Valley, one of the most productive agricultural regions in the United States. While agriculture has driven the local economy for decades, the city faces a growing water crisis that directly threatens the housing market in 2026. Fresno relies heavily on irrigation from rivers and groundwater, both of which are under increasing stress due to prolonged droughts, climate change, and overuse. Reduced water availability affects not only farming, but also residential communities, municipal services, and new housing developments. The housing market is vulnerable in multiple ways. Rising water costs increase household expenses, influencing affordability and buyer demand. New construction is slowed by stricter water regulations, higher permitting costs, and requirements for sustainable water usage, creating bottlenecks in suburban expansion. Existing homeowners are also affected. Mandatory water restrictions and higher utility bills reduce disposable income and can influence decisions about selling or refinancing properties. Fresno's dependence on agriculture amplifies market risk. Economic downturns in the agricultural sector, exacerbated by water scarcity, can reduce job security, impacting the ability of residents to maintain mortgages or invest in real estate. Neighborhood desirability is also tied to water availability. Areas with limited access to reliable supply or older infrastructure face slower property appreciation and higher maintenance costs, making them less attractive to buyers and investors. Public perception is shifting. Residents are increasingly aware of water scarcity and factor it into location decisions, neighborhood selection, and long-term investment planning. The 2026 data confirms that Fresno's housing market is no longer insulated from environmental and resource-based pressures. For buyers, investors, and homeowners, understanding water availability and infrastructure reliability has become essential to making informed decisions. Fresno demonstrates a key lesson. In regions where water is scarce, affordability, livability, and long-term housing stability are directly linked to resource management, making water a driving force behind market trends. City number 9, Phoenix suburb, Mesa, Arizona. Extending the water stress. Mesa, Arizona one of Phoenix's largest suburbs, is growing rapidly, but 2026 data shows that water scarcity threatens its housing market just like the city it surrounds. The region relies on a combination of the Colorado River, groundwater, and municipal supply from Phoenix, all under severe stress from prolonged drought and overconsumption. As Mesa's population swells, municipal water agencies are forced to ration supply, enforce conservation measures, and plan for rising rates. These pressures directly affect residential demand. Potential buyers are hesitant to invest in neighborhoods where water availability is uncertain or costly, slowing housing turnover and reducing property appreciation. New developments face regulatory scrutiny and must include sustainability measures, which increase construction costs. For homeowners, higher water bills and conservation mandates cut into budgets, potentially limiting discretionary spending and affecting mortgage affordability. Mesa demonstrates how even suburban markets, often considered safer alternatives to urban cores, are now exposed to environmental risks that directly influence housing stability and investment security. City number 10, Sacramento, California, capital under water pressure. Sacramento, California's state capital, has experienced rapid population growth over the last decade, drawing residents seeking jobs, schools, and affordable housing compared to the Bay Area. Yet 2026 data indicates that water shortages threaten to disrupt this housing market. The city depends on rivers, reservoirs, and snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada, all increasingly unreliable due to climate change and prolonged droughts. Rising water costs and rationing programs are beginning to influence housing decisions. Developers face limitations on new construction, requiring projects to demonstrate water sustainability and efficiency. Property values are starting to reflect these constraints, with homes in areas facing water stress experiencing slower appreciation and longer market times. Homeowners face rising utility bills, potentially affecting affordability and household finances. Sacramento illustrates that even inland cities, often considered safer alternatives to coastal markets, are vulnerable when essential resources are constrained. City number 11, Albuquerque suburb, Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Growth in an arid landscape. Rio Rancho, a fast-growing suburb of Albuquerque, relies heavily on groundwater and the Rio Grande for municipal supply. In 2026, population growth has placed additional pressure on already limited water resources. The city's water infrastructure must balance residential expansion with agricultural and industrial demand, creating regulatory challenges for new housing developments. Housing demand is affected as buyers weigh the long-term sustainability of neighborhoods. Rising utility costs, water rationing, and infrastructure limitations influence property desirability and affordability. Developers face increased costs for compliance and sustainability measures, slowing construction. Rio Rancho demonstrates how suburban growth in arid regions directly exposes housing markets to environmental constraints, where water scarcity is no longer a background concern, but a central determinant of long-term property value. City number 12, Bakersfield, California. Central Valley housing under threat. Bakersfield, California, in the heart of the Central Valley, is a growing city that depends heavily on irrigation and groundwater. In 2026, persistent drought and declining aquifers have created significant risks for both agriculture and residential development. Rising water costs, supply restrictions, and regulatory requirements are affecting new construction, slowing suburban expansion, and influencing buyer decisions. Homeowners face increasing utility bills and mandatory conservation programs, which can affect budgets and mortgage affordability. Neighborhoods without reliable water access are seeing slower appreciation, while developers must incorporate expensive sustainability measures into projects. Bakersfield illustrates that in 2026, water scarcity has become a primary driver of housing stability, where markets once considered safe are now exposed to environmental and economic risk. And that's the reality in 2026. Water isn't just a utility, it's becoming one of the most critical factors shaping housing markets across the United States. From Phoenix and Tucson to Los Angeles, Fresno, and even suburban markets like Mesa and Rio Rancho, scarcity is no longer a distant threat. It's here, and it's influencing property values, development decisions, and the long-term security of your investment. Cities that once seemed like safe bets for growth are now showing cracks in their housing stability, all because the most basic resource, water, is under stress. For homeowners, renters, and investors alike, this is a wake-up call. Rising water costs, rationing, and regulatory restrictions are not temporary inconveniences. They directly impact affordability, household budgets, and the long-term desirability of neighborhoods. Developers are recalculating risk, slowing construction, and adding expensive water-saving measures to projects, which can reduce housing supply and change market dynamics overnight. If you're thinking of buying, selling, or investing, understanding water stress is now as essential as location, schools, or commute times. But here's the key takeaway. Being informed gives you an advantage. Knowing which cities are at risk, where supply is constrained, and how infrastructure challenges intersect with housing markets allows you to make smarter decisions. Ignoring water scarcity isn't just risky, it could cost you thousands or even hundreds of thousands over time. If this video helped you see the connection between water and housing, hit the like button to make sure others find this critical information. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on the latest housing trends, climate-related market risks, and financial insights that aren't covered anywhere else. Share this video with anyone considering a move, a home purchase, or an investment. This knowledge can literally save money and protect your future. And don't just watch, comment below. Which city surprised you the most? Do you think water scarcity will become the defining factor in housing markets over the next decade? Your insight helps spark conversation and awareness, which is exactly what the housing industry needs.